Welcome to Let's Thrive Postpartum.
Hi, and welcome to Let's Thrive Postpartum. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Ashley.
We are really excited for you guys to join us today. We have an extremely amazing guest today. I want to introduce you to Louise Harkins. She is your new go-to for British slang, snacks, and all things matrescence embodiment. She has over a decade of experience in specialist mental health services, and then she shifted her focus a couple years ago to support moms through her business, Mapping Matrescence. As a coach, a circle facilitator, ceremony guide, she helps mothers move through matrescence, which is the transformation journey of becoming and being a mother, and embody their new selves with confidence and clarity. She creates compassion and brave spaces for women to explore who they are beyond societal expectations and reclaim their power to navigate the push and pull of motherhood. And Louise, I just want to say I'm so excited you're here. I've had the pleasure of attending one of your circles, and it was experience unlike any other circle I've done. And to this day, it's still one of my favorite things I've ever done. It's very touching in a deep way that I didn't expect. I learned so much, and I'm really excited to talk with you today about what matrescence is.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you for both having me on as well. I'm really excited. I could talk about matrescence all day, so we'll have to find ways to keep confined. But yeah, I'm really excited to share more about this.
It's amazing. Well, yeah, I'd like to start out by kind of diving into what matrescence is, because it's a word that even I haven't been super familiar with, but popping up on social media, and especially this past year, there's been a lot of some different news articles and, a little more publication about matrescence. And I think it's something, though, that a lot of moms are unfamiliar with, or they've heard it, but they're like, is that a slang word for something, or what does it actually mean? So could you give us a little context to what matrescence is and why it's so important?
Yeah, totally. I really appreciate that. And I think you're right. It's so cool to see like a shift in the landscape on social media or in media in general to talk more about this. But I agree. I meet people all the time that are like, sorry, what's that? So it's amazing to be offered this opportunity to really dive into it a bit more and why I think it's important and how I came to it and that sort of thing. So matrescence is a term that actually was spoken of in like the 70s by Dana Raphael, who's an anthropologist. She actually coined the term doula as well, but which took off, but matrescence did not. And it really talks about the developmental transition that mothers go through when they become mothers. So what's I think really important to know about it is it's not just the changes, which are huge, as we know, in the body and on the emotional level, but also on a deeper, like spiritual, social, political level. So it's like beyond what we are only really still just beginning to talk about, but it's like the identity shift that women experience when they become mothers. A couple of things that I think always really, really bring it to life is hearing when people share matrescence like adolescence, because I think people have this like framework and understanding that adolescence is this huge transformative time for people, and that it's not like you wake up one day from like being a child and then you're suddenly like this teenager adult. It's like that it happens over a period of years really, and it affects every single level. And we generally, or at least try to, bring a lot of understanding and compassion to young adults that are going through the process of adolescence. And so that's something that I think matrescence brings to light as well. It like kind of people are like, oh yeah, remember when you were an adolescent and like you were hormonal and spotty and all the things, and like you basically question everything about yourself and life. This is like speaking to that similar experience and catalyst that takes place when women become mothers. And I think really acknowledging that it takes time. And then another thing that I think helps bring it home for people, as well as like the matrescence and adolescence, is thinking about how when the baby is born, so is a mother. And I always think that that like stays with people. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, you become a mother in name when the baby is born and brought into this world, or however you come to become a mother, through adoption or surrogacy, but you don't necessarily feel like a mother yet. There's like this whole process. Like you maybe
Yeah.
are doing the things, but do you actually feel like it? So I often say to the women that I
Yeah.
work with or in spaces that it's beyond just the doing, it's about the being. So it's about who you feel you are in this role. So that's really kind of like a bit more of like diving into what it is. It's kind of looking
Yeah.
holistically at the experiences of a mother as they become one in this transition, and that it takes
Yeah.
time. Mhm.
Can I ask about that? So that really makes a lot of sense when you relate it to adolescence, because you're right. We all know that experience. We know it takes a while. When you're looking at matrescence, how long does that, is there a time
Mhm.
frame? Is it like, oh, your child's now 2, you're out of this? Is this
Mhm.
now a lifetime transition? What are you seeing, Louise, on the duration of
hmm
matrescence?
I love this question, and jury's still out. There is just like, as we know, the word is still just like definitions of it are still evolving. Research has just begun to being done. So Dr. Athan in out of Columbia University is doing research around this. But a few different people have spoken about it. And so like the initial like really profound transformative phase for matrescence, people talk about the first 1 to 3 years typically
Mm.
being like this process of like the first evolution. Like you add the first layer to yourself of like, that's how long it takes, which I think can be a little bit scary for pregnant women and new mothers. But when
Yeah.
you've been through it, it's actually extremely validating, I find.
Hmm.
It takes that long. So there's the rough with the smooth with that, but that's typically what people find is like that first layer of like when you can really feel like a mother as much as like being it in name. Arguably, and the definition from Athan is that matrescence arguably lasts a lifetime. And
Oh.
so that there are. And so I'm trained as a Seasons of Matrescence guide through Nikki McCann. And I love this model because she uses the seasons to anchor you into this change, and talks about it being, we go through cycles. And I
Yeah.
think as women, we are cyclical beings. We have the menstrual cycle. You know, I geek out on the moon. We connect to the moon. And so I think it makes sense that matrescence is a cyclical process too. And when you've had a child, and you've been mothering for a period of time, I think you do see yourself go through this. It's like you are in a winter when you're immediately postpartum and you come out of it. But then maybe you'll go through it again when your child is going through another difficult transition, start of
Hmm.
daycare, or you return to work, or a XXX partner goes to
Yeah.
work in a different job. All these changes then have an influence on who we are and how we see ourselves in this role. So it's a little bit of a spectrum answer, but that
Yeah.
people are playing around with the idea of 1 to 3 years, but then there is this component that it's like cyclical and lasts a lifetime.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I think that the fact that it's cyclical is, I get, yeah, while you're pregnant, that could be like, what? Oh my gosh, like this is gonna like keep happening. But once you've been a mom for a couple of years, you're like, yes, it does keep happening. And I do keep going through. And I do think it goes back to, this idea. I think a lot of moms and humans in general have these very fixed mindsets, right? Like, I am this, and this is how it always should be, or
mhm,
like, I should always feel competent at this, or I should always feel good about my role or my identity and that kind of thing. And we all know, though, like, life is not static, like nothing is static. And so having that framework that it is cyclical, that it's like the seasons, that mindset I think could be really helpful and supportive for a lot of moms, because you have good days, you have good months, you have good years, you have bad days and bad months, and hopefully not a whole bad year, but it could happen.
mhm,
And so I think it kind of builds in that like flexibility and like expecting that things change, right? They
mhm,
change for the better, they change for the worse, but no matter what, like they're always changing. And that's a hard thing. And with moms that I work with, that often they have a hard time accepting that this present moment isn't forever, right? Like it feels
Mhm.
like it's forever, but it's not. And I'd be so curious. We could have so many like philosophical conversations on like where that comes from and why that sort of flexibility and accepting of change is feels so hard. I don't know, harder now maybe than in the past, of like the idea that things change and adaptability is like a requirement of
Mhm.
um of the job.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I love that you speak to that point, because this is like a really key piece of why when I heard about matrescence, I like couldn't, I always describe it like it was like I couldn't put it down, which sounds really weird, but it was like I had to like keep reading and talking and just
Mhm.
making sense of it, because when I heard about it, and it was just like on a random podcast one day, it's like tell the story. I was like nap trapped with my kid in the car. I remember I was listening to something about parenting, trying to figure out the thing that I felt I was doing wrong. And another podcast came on and it said this word and explained about the like identity shift. And it really gave me this permission that I didn't know I needed, that
Mhm.
it was okay to change. And actually, a lot of it is like that's inherently the point. And it
Yeah.
was like I wasn't failing in some way by feeling like everything was different. And actually, that there was nothing to fix about me changing and evolving in this way. That was actually like really the point of this, like part of this
Yeah.
experience. But it's just like, I think the culture and overculture has really taught us that there's, especially with this role of mom, and again, yeah, we could totally go down many routes with this, but I think there is a really prevalent overculture about mothers, particularly bouncing back, right? We talk about bounce back,
Mm-hmm.
get back to
Mhm.
your body. When are you going back to work? When are you sleeping? Like, when are you sleeping better? There's all this like back narrative that comes
Yeah.
up that gets internalized for women when, and so that there is this like disconnect in their experience that they're like, I don't feel anything like that person. And it's this unattainable in my from my perspective and what I've seen to keep clawing and trying to go back.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean you completely lose everything about yourself, right? That I want to be clear there. It's like you keep these threads to yourself, but you
Yeah.
add these new layers, which I think is so powerful, so transformative. But there is messaging that you have to butt up against to be able to take that invitation and take that medicine to actually feel good about evolving in that way. So I think it's really powerful.
Yeah.
Elise, let me ask you about this because that is a great point and something Ashley and I have talked about multiple times on this podcast is you just said that changing and that identity shift is kind of a
Mhm.
unmet expectations that you expect yourself to bounce back. You accept to be your old self, and suddenly you feel different and new. And that misalignment really brings a lot of overwhelm, mental stress, all the things that can add to depression and mental health challenges. Louise, from a matrescence background in your experience, is there anything a mom can do if she's kind of having this disconnect, if she suddenly feels like a new person and she's not meeting her set expectations of bouncing back?
Mhm.
Anything that from your experience that a mom could do or know that's going to help her kind of connect these and make herself realize that this change is okay and there's a way to get through it?
Mhm. So I think the most powerful and transformative thing that can support women in through this process and that feeling self-doubt or not meeting expectations is to be with other women that are going through it. Whether that
Yeah.
be a women's circle, whether that be an online group, whether that be interactions in the playground, the park, whatever space that you can be in, to really talk about some of those changes. So, I mean, that's really the anchor of all the work that I try to do through mine is to create these like compassionate spaces that women can explore these changes. Because I really, really like deep within my heart believe, and I see it all the time, when you're able to talk openly and honestly about these things in the presence of other women that get it, and they do not need to be going through the same thing like at all. They can just be, they will have been going through it in their own unique way. That I
Mhm.
think that that is a source of healing because you don't feel alone. You feel
Yeah.
seen, you feel validated in that experience. And like that is, I like get chills talking about it because I see it happen all the time. And someone's like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know anyone else was feeling like this. And that
Yeah.
is I think the best thing that you can do. Like the work that you guys are doing in your community, there's like other versions. Find the one that suits you. Like, you know, my circles
Yeah.
might not be the ones for everybody. Somebody might prefer online, you know, there's a variety of things, but find other women. That to me, I
Yeah.
think is the most important thing that
Yep.
can be done.
Well, and I think too, I mean, that is one thing that we've talked about before has kind of been a little lost over time is like you do get when you're surrounded by women, or you have a supportive community through pregnancy into birth and motherhood, you do almost have a softer handoff into motherhood. And
Mm-hmm.
people that are more isolated or just say you're somewhere new and you don't have a sense of community or that support around you, it's a harder transition because you were trying to do it more alone than someone else's. And I think that, like you said, being in community, I don't think it can be understated how important the social support aspect is
Mm-hmm.
for moms, for your mental health period, but especially for moms. And we just don't think that it's I don't know. I think we're at a point in time in life right now where you don't realize how important it is to have real social connection,
Mm-hmm.
um, because the landscape has just changed so much. But
Yeah.
it's so important. I mean, it's like, yeah,
Well,
I
we
love that
feel
you brought
so
that up.
connected. Yeah, we feel
Mhm.
so connected because we have social media and we're seeing and we're maybe texting, but it's not the same as like
Yeah,
building a real community where you can have these like honest and extremely vulnerable conversations. And again, kind of going back to like our sense of the overculture and the scripts that exist around what being a good mother is and all of those things. When you unpack that, actually feeling brave enough, entering a space where you do feel brave enough to share that, like, I'm scared, I don't know what I'm doing, or like I'm so
yeah,
overwhelmed. Like that is so necessary as a part of it. Like I always kind of speak about as well, which is what I think you experienced a bit of the circle too, Kelly. Another thing that people can do if they're not able to connect into community, but I do think that that's really important, is to find moments of like small ritual that can like anchor you in certain moments, to like pause
mhm,
and honor the experience and changes that you're going through, because I think that that's super powerful.
Yeah, so let's talk
yeah.
about that because that was one of my next questions. You'd mentioned rituals. Give us some examples of what that means. And is there specific rituals that you've seen that work or that moms should try? Give us some
Mhm.
details.
Yeah, so I think what I would say, firstly, because I just never want to add to any mental load or to-do list of any like mother that exists. The ritual that is going to be the most effective is the one that works for you. And like to demystify this idea of ritual, like we can do it in these big, beautiful ways of like ceremony and circle and candles and all the
Mhm.
things. But really, like when I boil down like what ritual is, it's any action that has intention behind it. And when I think about matrescence, it's about what honors you as a mother. So not the thing that you're doing for your kid or that, it's like a moment for yourself that lets you slow down and like pause to be like, okay, I'm doing like this is like I'm worthy of this pause, or this is good for me, or that was a tough moment, but I can honor myself. And that can look in so many different ways. It can be lighting a candle and just like saying an affirmation to yourself. It can be making your cup of tea in like a different intentional way and whispering an intention for the day into it. It could be taking a shower and like washing off the really challenging day that you had and like imagining it being released into the water. So it's like
Yeah,
everyday activities can become ritual if you put that intention behind them. And you can involve your kids too. Like I was sharing this recently, my youngest, and it's like one of those things that kind of evolves because of them, right? Like whenever I say goodbye to her, drop her at daycare, she gives me a little kiss, and then she like waits and looks at me and I say, oh, go be kind today. And like that's just like our little transition ritual. And it just
Yeah.
kind of emerged from something, but she waits for it. It anchors us, it slows us down. And I think it's this moment I think transitions are really good times to think about when ritual can
Yeah.
come in as well. Like I have one, I come to my desk, I pull an oracle card, and that's me kind of switching from dropping kids to like being in my like work day. So yeah, the important thing is the intention behind the activity and whatever works for you. Because I think ritual, people think a lot about it needing to be like the same time every day.
Yeah.
And that's great. If you can do
Yeah.
that, awesome. But again, like if that's not what it is, there is no failing on that. It's like whatever is meaningful and tending to you and your like sweet soul that I think and honors your journey is like so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, Kelly, too, that's similar to what the word intention. I use it all the time with
Mhm.
clients because I'm like, we are very, a lot of times throughout our day, we're kind of just going through the day without without a lot of awareness, and you're kind of just following the flow of whatever you're doing. And sometimes when you kind of pause and it's like we talk about coffee is like my thing. And so I always tell moms, I'm like, if you drink coffee, when you pour that cup of coffee for yourself in the morning, can that 30 seconds, it's like just you. It's just for
Mm.
you. You're not pouring the coffee and then like running over and just mindlessly doing all these things. Can you just mindfully pour your cup of coffee and take a sip and just be like, hmm, this is my favorite thing, right? Or steam the milk. Take the 30 seconds to steam the milk and put it in the coffee. And the days that I do that, I don't do it every day, but it's like it's 30 seconds. It's just this one little thing that's for you. And I'm like, it doesn't, because moms all the time, I can't go to the spa. I don't have in 2 hours. And I'm like, no, most people
Mhm.
don't. And that's not what it is when we're talking about ritual or how to care for yourself or how to be mindful or how to be a little more aware. And so I love that. I love those examples.
Yeah, totally. I think it's really, really important that intention and the piece around like it's something for you. It's about honoring yourself. And so, again, tying that back to matrescence, I mean, that's part of why I really love it. People talk like there's so much in spaces around how to care for baby, how to do parenting, and those are all totally valid, important components. But I think there is that missing piece that matrescence like immediately brings in, and you can do it in many ways, but that it does center the mother's experiences.
Yeah.
And something that like I think about a lot is that this experience of matrescence is really this crazy, wild, like invitation to reimagine every single role that you hold. So
Hmm.
it's we when you think about matrescence, you're thinking about this role of mother, and of course, primarily because that's what you're talking about traversing and becoming. But it's not just about changing who you are as a mother, it's changing every single role, who you are as a daughter, a sister, a partner, a friend. And I think that's why I love it as a framework because you can look at all of those things. It's like you were
Hmm.
never a one-dimensional role before having a child, and you definitely aren't one still when you become a mother. So it's like it's valuable to honor and look at all of those components of yourself and look at how it can be reimagined, reclaimed in whatever way that makes sense to you, which can feel overwhelming too. So just to
Yeah.
name that.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's my personal experience. I think I've shared this multiple times. I wasn't prepared for the identity shift
Mhm.
mentally that came to
Same.
me after having a child.
Hmm.
I expected the physical recovery. I expected the sleepless nights. I didn't expect whatever shifted internally at
Yeah.
all. And so, Louise, can I ask you this? So, a lot of our listeners are moms who are currently pregnant and they're planning ahead and they're thinking about this. So, all of us having, become mothers and that identity shift happens, is there anything a pregnant mom could prepare for or should know to help make some of that transition into matrescence easier for her?
Mhm. Yeah, so one of the things, I mean, firstly, I think just being aware that it's something that can happen. So speaking back to that piece, to know that like this isn't something that's wrong with you or that needs fixing or is any kind of failing on your part. That disorientation is totally normal and is a part of the process. And it's something that you can actually honor and tend to and know that's okay. So I think that's like foundation level. Awesome that they even are here listening to it and know the word going into it. of course, talking about going into like supportive spaces to be able to have those set up before so that you can talk through some of these changes. One of the reasons why I really decided to move like my matrescence support in the direction of women's circles was because I realized the stark difference between both my matrescence journeys. The first time round, I was in New York. I was living in a neighborhood where there was so much going on. There was loads of young moms. So I had all these different options for groups and things like that. Second time round was COVID. So there was literally nothing like going on.
Yeah.
I mean, things online, but like it was, and I was second time mom, should have been like more prepared and knowing what I was doing. And actually it was like even more threw me into this spin of like the identity change because I don't think I had other women around me. So that's the other thing. And I think another part that can be really helpful, and you may want support to do this, and it's some work that I've done with pregnant women too, but I think it's just to start to surface some of those internalized expectations or social scripts that you might have around what it means to be a good mother. And
Yeah.
I just want to like asterisk that though, because I think you can do some of that work and some of it just shows up that you don't expect. Because I think there's so much of it that it's unconscious. And so, yes, you could do that. But I also, why I put that asterisk is because I don't want women to be like, okay, I did all the work. I thought about all these expectations I had of myself, but then it's still like totally like me up that I had no idea what was going on. It's like, no, but that's, that might happen too. But I do think it eases it to realize like, okay, for my own story, it's like, my mum was like a real overgiver. Like, I want to say overgiver, that feels shaming, but like she very much took on the martyrdom role of mothering. That was very much culturally how she was taught, things like that. So I totally had internalized that and I didn't realize it. So when I transitioned to going back to work, even though I'd made all these decisions in my mind that like, I know it's good for my family, it's good for my career, there was such a disconnect for me that I was like, I'm still a bad mom for doing this because what moms do is stay home and do that. So I think being able to unearth some of those stories does help to ease the transition to be like, okay, what have I seen about the role of mother and what mothers do that I think I should do? But often people, so I think I'll leave that there and see what you think.
It is really helpful. I mean, a lot of the moms that I've worked with, and even within myself, like sometimes when there is a really big struggle going on, it a lot of times comes down to that core belief of what a mother is and what a mother isn't. And when you can drill into like, well, where did that come from? And is that, can we let that go because that was someone else's life and someone else's experience? There's kind of this sense of relief in a lot of ways, because sometimes for better or for worse, right? Sometimes it's letting go of something that was really unhealthy and really hard. And then other times it's just realizing that like, that's just not my way. It's not a good fit for me. And I don't need my motherhood journey to be compared against something that, there's nothing we can do about it. And so, I love I think that identity piece, and Kelly, we've talked about it before, for both of us was like, just threw me for a loop. I had such a strange sense of disconnect, and especially going back to work where I was working like before I was before I had the baby. And now I'm like, I'm here, but now I have a tiny human that's also in the world, but like all these people knew me before I had a baby. It was just, I remember being so disoriented is a really good word. I like that. I like that you used that word.
Yeah, it's really, really surreal. And like when I think about rites of passage teaching, and so I haven't really brought that in here, but like people talk about matrescence being this rite of passage and essentially, being a life transition that marks from a previous role into a new one. When you think about that and some teachings, Jane Hardwick Collins is someone that I draw on a lot, but she talks about like how important it is, and indigenous cultures do this a lot through their ceremonies and rites, but that we can do it in our modern ways is to be seen in that new role is a really important part of the puzzle. Because when we talk about identity, it's not just how you see yourself, it's how other people see you. So those things are happening in tandem, and some of it you have control over and some of it you don't. And so yeah, I remember that so viscerally when you described that experience. Like you go back to work and you're like, hi, do you not see like how different all of this is? But then you're kind of, I was certainly pretending that things weren't that different, but like
Yeah.
everything was different and my whole home life was completely different, but like everything was. And so I think it's like, it's so surreal. It's so surreal, that disconnect. But again, that's kind of part of it, that
Yeah.
as we are witnessed and seen by these different people and different communities and different parts of our lives, it helps
Yeah.
us on that transition into really feeling and becoming that person that we were kind of always meant to be. But it feels more real and that disconnect gets smaller. So it's definitely a
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
Louise, this is so fascinating because, again, Ashley and I have talked a lot about the mental health side. We've talked a lot with
Yeah.
different experts on the physical recovery and all the things that happen from motherhood, but looking at it from that whole life transition and the ritual aspect is just so important and something that I don't feel like it's talked enough. So I very much appreciate you
Yeah.
talking about with us today and continuing to teach moms in society that this is happening. And it makes so much sense bringing it back to that adolescent shift. Louise, if moms listening or family members listening want to learn more about matrescence, want to learn more about what you're doing, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, thank you. So the best way probably is going to my Instagram, which is like at Mapping Matrescence, because everything kind of gets linked through there. My website is the same, mappingmatrescence.com. And I have like a really exciting offering launching in the new year. Not sure when this is gonna go live. So yeah, that is really diving into all of that like liminal in between phase when you no longer feel like who you were, but you don't know who you're becoming, and really digging into like practical tools and practices that can support you through that. So yeah,
Wonderful.
my Instagram is the best website. People can just message me. As I said, I could talk about this all day. So just DM me, I'll chat with you and like think about the different work that I do for sure.
This has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. I think yeah, I've got all kinds of stuff that I myself am taking away and ready to yeah, ready to think about. So, Louise, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yes, and
thank
for everyone
you.
listening, we will link everything
Yeah.
that Luis mentioned into the show notes. So just scroll down below, they will be right there. And if you aren't part of a motherhood circle and it's something that you're interested in, they're amazing. If you're in the Charleston area, Luis has a brilliant one, such a fan. And hope you guys have a great week. Thank you, Luis, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please be sure to hit subscribe, leave us your feedback, and give us a 5-star review. For even more support, visit us at wethrivepostpartum.com/podcast to sign up for our newsletter and learn more about our community. Remember, you are not alone. With support, you can feel better. Together, let's thrive postpartum.